Hi there and welcome to Lawrence Dallaglio's Lions podcast with my special guest, Ben Kay.
Hello mate, just pouring you a nice pint of London Pride.
An outstanding pint of London Pride, if I might say so, the official beer of the British and Irish Lions, which is what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, and it takes skill,
Right?
dedication,
Indeed.
and time.
Yes, it takes all of those things, I think, to get into the British and Irish Lions squad.
Actually, I was talking about the skill, dedication and time that goes into producing and brewing an amber ale like London Pride.
Absolutely, and it takes exactly the same if you want to play and be part of the Lions and play with pride.
We've got our pints, ready for the match?
And this podcast in partnership with London Pride, the official beer of the British and Irish Lions. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Benny, and do remember to drink responsibly. Hello and good evening and welcome to Lawrence Dallaglio's podcast. As you've heard, live from the Cabbage Patch, we have a crowd. Would you like to make some noise? Here we are. It is pouring with rain, as it always is at Twickenham, and I'm joined by Leicester, England and Lions legend Ben Kay, and I'm also joined by the Evening Standard sports correspondent Daniel Gallen. Daniel, welcome. Would you like to just talk so people can hear exactly where you're from?
Yes, how's it? I'm from Ooh, I definitely dialed that up. Hi, I'm Daniel from Joburg. Great to be on.
More of that in a minute. And I'm also joined by the legend that is Damian Hopley, Wasps, England, absolute legend, and now the CEO of the Rugby Players Association. Gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good to see you all. Daniel, if I can start with you. I mean, you're sort of feeling quite pleased.
I'm ready. I'm bracing for it.
You're feeling quite pleased with yourself at the moment, aren't you, really, as a South African? Give us a perspective from South Africa, because, you know, we're obviously disappointed in the last week, as you were in the first week. You speak to people out in South Africa. What's the mood? What's the general feeling that, you know, from Joburg, from Cape Town, from your friends in South Africa?
I think given how the first test was so one-sided, just as the second test was, I think people are very consciously trying to temper expectations. I think both sides have really dialed down the chat. It's been after the madness and quite frankly the poisonous build-up to the second test, it's been a little boring. I'm a little disappointed. I kind of wanted a bit more blood and thunder, but I think the Boks are not getting ahead of themselves. Certainly the write-ups have been very measured. But I think they'll be quietly confident. I mean, we talk about momentum in the sport so often, and I think the Springboks will think that momentum is on their side.
So given that the first half of last week's test lasted almost as long as the rant that your director of rugby made on social media, I mean, it was 65 minutes, just so
I think it was shorter, actually.
I think you're right. I mean, do people feel vindicated by that in South Africa? I mean, do they view it as just sort of politics, or just what happens between, you know, coaches on a rugby field, or do they think that actually the main event seems to have happened off the field rather than on the field?
It's a tough question, because people will say, well, job done, right? The Boks won, the ref was objectively on South Africa's side. I think we can say fairly that the ref was on the Lions side in the first test, but that's rugby, right? Every ref will have a different interpretation and every captain will play it differently. Some people will say that he's opened up a can of worms now and that he's completely changed the way that referees will, officiate the game. I didn't love it, but again, the result kind of speaks for itself. So, yeah, people will feel vindicated. I don't know if I would put too much stock in Rusty's video for the results.
Just a lot of people talk about Rusty over here, saying, "Well, has he gone bonkers? Has he gone mad?" It was an odd thing to put out, but in South Africa, his reputation is he will have thought that through 100%. I heard a story that when he was the Free State Cheetahs coach, he used to the lights on top of the stadium. He'd change them. So the players knew what sort of game plan he wanted to put in place. He's that much of a, not control freak, but he likes everything planned and detailed to the X amount. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. He finds loopholes and he drives a truck through it. That's kind of how...
Like being a water boy without any water.
That's right. That's right. It's not technically illegal, and we can talk about the spirit of the game. He kind of, balls to that. So if there's a loophole, he's going to go through it. He's kind of seen as the mad genius, and I guess it depends on your allegiance, whether you love him or hate him. It's sort of like, I guess, Jose Mourinho was in football here. If you're on his side, he's He's a superstar. If you're against him, well, then he's twisting the rules and he's not good for the game. I mean, personally, I love him.
I love the water boy thing. It's like under nines when your dad comes on with the water, isn't it? It's brilliant. I think it's fantastic.
And Damian, as one of the world's greatest tourists, I can definitely say that. This tour for the players has been very, very different. As the CEO of the RPA, who look after all the professional players in this country, is it exactly what we expected? I mean, have you spoken to anyone out there about the circumstances? Because basically all the players have done is see the hotel. They arrived in South Africa in a level 4 lockdown, complete alcohol ban. Can't imagine that extended to the Lions team hotel or to Warren Gatland for that matter. But they've been to training, they've seen a coach, they've seen a stadium. This hasn't been a Lions tour like any other we've ever seen.
Well, when you and I first toured South Africa in 1994, you'd see a hotel room, a training field, a dressing room and a bar. And ours was probably in reverse order, wasn't it?
A nightclub, a casino.
That's an entirely different podcast. However, but yeah, I just think, the Lions experience that you have both, done at the highest level is so different to what the guys are going through now. And you're in this bubble. I think the players have gone through an extraordinary 18 months in terms of what they've delivered to get rugby restarted and back on track, and have made huge sacrifices. But I think, the thought of not having the Red Army and all of the things that go with Lions not being there, I think it's been a very, very different experience and a very challenging experience. Particularly, I held a lot of tackle shields in my short career, and if you're not in that Test match team and you're cannon fodder, it's a very, very long 5-6 weeks.
Well, it is. Even if you can't go out the hotel, you can't go and drown your sorrows. You can't do anything, can you? Really, other than maybe get better at FIFA or something. I'm not sure, but listen, we're going to talk about the selection. We're going to talk about the series decider, which is, what we're looking forward to. But Ben, we've got to look back. It was a monumental Test match, obviously quite one-sided, but there were key moments that turned the game. The tries, the controversy. I mean, I guess it was everything Rassie Erasmus wanted it to be, because every single decision was analysed in the minutest detail, which is why we got the first half that lasted 65 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was a complete reversal of the week before, because the week before South Africa were totally dominant in the first half, and we thought, how are the Lions going to get back into this just in terms of matching them? And then second half, although they were 12-3 down, they came back and won the game. Again, Lions totally dominant in the first half, and you sort of felt, well, have they got enough points in the bag? And they obviously didn't. And the decisions in the first week went for the Lions. The decisions this week, although I must say, I thought the referee, Ben O'Keefe, handled and managed the game perfectly. His explanation, he was obviously under massive pressure, and his explanation of every decision was brilliant.
Okay, so do you think... Yeah. Hand on, I mean, you and I were...
If that was in the Premiership...
Yeah, we were...
Cheslin Colby would have got at least one red card.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. But you've got to put it into the wider perspective that this is the showpiece game. This is the biggest game in rugby, bar the World Cup, isn't it? Yeah. And they don't want it to be decided on a card. So at the back of the mind, although the referee's not been told to go out that, I once spoke to Wayne Barnes and he said there are decisions where you can talk down. You can use your language over the mic to talk it down from a red to a yellow. But I think, if that was in the Premiership, a bog standard game every week, Cheslin Colby probably would have got 2 red cards. And Faf de Klerk, we didn't see enough angles of it, but he's close because he doesn't wrap his arms and he comes in. But let's not.
Well, we only got one angle of that particular challenge.
Yeah, but let's not.
Which might steer you towards the fact that
let's not sound like we're whinging, because there's no. I don't think we would have won the game anyway.
No, quite right. But it's interesting, isn't it? The big decision, you get 4 angles. The other decision, you only get 1 angle.
Yeah, I think the thing that's annoyed me most about it is all the stuff post-match, really, on social media. And social media in this tour has been poisonous. Yeah. On all sides of the coin. It doesn't help
when the director of rugby puts an hour rant on social media. I mean, that's only going to create a slightly more toxic environment.
The one that I have a problem with is everyone saying Maro Itoje's kneeling on a guy's neck. If you look at the picture, and you always get angles in pictures and video footage, but this is a still picture, and you can see all of the yellow collar of his shirt, which is just a hoop like a t-shirt. Yeah. And you can see all of it. So he's not. He's kneeling on his chest, And you can say, well, he shouldn't be doing that. But stuff like that happens in a game all the time where actually you're ending up kneeling on someone in a ruck. And then as it gets up to go away, you just stay there for a couple of seconds later. And that's all Dallaglio's doing. He's not saying, you're choking me. He's saying, let me get up and go to the next phase. And that's been blown out of all proportion on social media.
And look, I think Warren Gatland, has not entered into, the sort of tit for tat. He's just said, look, what we want to see is a game that flows a bit quicker, because clearly the Lions' game plan all along has been to speed up the game, to try and keep the ball in play for as long as possible, and to try and move some of the ginormous South African forwards around the field. And when the first half lasts for 65 minutes, clearly that's not going to favour the Lions. It's going to favour the Springboks. So, Damian, from your perspective, I mean, were they decisive moments? The Colby, yellow/red. The fact that Henshaw maybe could have scored and the Lions would have ended up, ahead at half time.
For me, I'd sort of dial it back a bit to Rassie. I like Rassie. I think he's a great sort of free thinker for the game. But one of the values of rugby is respect, and I think he spent 60 minutes disrespecting an official, and that then sets the tone for the keyboard warriors, for the toxicity of this second test, for the tone, all of the aggro that happened, and I just
World Rugby are looking into it. I mean, they might look into it a bit sooner rather than later. But
there's no rush, is there? I do feel that if you allow this sort of behaviour to be accepted, then we're in a very interesting. Jen and I were talking before we came through, but rugby's an interesting crossroads, isn't it? Because when do behaviours become acceptable? And if World Rugby don't come down on someone, if that has been a player who'd gone on, online and had given an hour-long briefing about the referee, and he'd have been slung out the back door in a rate of knots. Now, Rassie Erasmus is an extraordinary talent. He is a great thinker and pioneered the South African World Cup success. But I just think from a game-wide perspective, World Rugby have to act quickly. And you've got to step in and you've got to stop that and you've got to nip it in the bud. Because if you don't, it starts to erode the value of the sport. Warren, I think, has been very good to sort of not go in on a tit for tat. But I just think, as a governing body, govern the game. Step in.
To be honest, they've not helped themselves by having a South African TMO and having a sighting officer from Zimbabwe. I mean, with all due respect, that is not what you call independent in any way, shape or form. Now, not having a go at the integrity of the official, but as I said last week, I played in the first ever game where there was a TMO and he was from South Africa and we lost the test match. And then World Rugby thought, actually, maybe it'd be a good idea if we had someone independent. I just thought his position has been compromised all the way through the series.
We all said that the first week, all the decisions would go the Lions' way because it had been flagged up. It was such a big thing.
It flagged up by Gatland.
Exactly.
Let's be fair.
But exactly.
There's nothing wrong with doing that in a press conference. I mean,
but what I'm saying, I think he
not
got
on social media.
put in a really impossible position, because that's why we said that the Lions would get all the decisions in the first week, because if he gives a controversial decision, which he thinks is totally fair, everyone will say, well, no, it's not. That's just because you're a homer. And you've got to be really, really... it's not just thinking about what's happening on the pitch and the teams involved. It's thinking about the optics of it and what everyone else is going to put the pressure on. And you leave yourself open to either side saying either... he didn't give the decision because he's South African, or he's overcompensated because we're all complaining about him.
On the Erasmus thing, though, is it possible that two things can be true at the same time? That it's against the spirit of the game, that we don't want to see directors of rugby or coaches coming out and producing an hour-long, highly edited video, but at the same time that he had some points, that there were... That,
there are ways and means, surely.
Those points should be addressed behind closed doors.
In the right channels.
So what you create is a hatred, on social media.
So you're not necessarily shooting down the message, you're shooting down the way it was delivered.
The style was inappropriate.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about the positive side of Erasmus, which there is, I think in the first test, Gatland got his game plan right, and to a certain degree they executed it pretty well. And then the second half, I felt that the substitutions that he made actually enhanced the game. What we saw at the last weekend was the flip side of that. South Africa actually brought on players that effectively changed the game.
Can I ask you guys a question?
And they kept their best players on the field. I mean, Faf de Klerk and Pollard were very influential in the overall result.
So in South Africa, there seems to be a perception that Jacques Nienaber, who is actually the head coach, has been largely forgotten. That Rassie Erasmus is the one getting too much credit. And they've both said very publicly, Jacques in charge, Rusty's the assistant. That's why he's the water boy. I mean, South Africa's defensive record, under Jacques Nienaber as defensive coach, I don't have the stats on me. I should have had that, but it's like something like 9 tries and 12 tests or something like that with Jacques in charge, and the defense was immense. Do you think that he's getting enough credit here in the UK?
No, not at all. But that is solely down to the fact that Rassie Erasmus hasn't gone, right, you're in charge, I'll disappear. He's gone, you're in charge, but I'll do an hour-long video saying that I'm nothing to do with South Africa,
and also,
but I'm wearing the club shop.
That's fair.
They haven't got credit because there's been 958 kicks in the game as well. So, listen, we were all about winning. So is it win at all costs? Is it win at any cost? It would appear to be. South Africa are never going to change the way they play. Certainly in the immediate future, they certainly always played that way. Maybe not quite as much kicking as we've seen, and we'll get on to the selection of Cobus Reinach at scrum half because
What's interesting
will it still be the same?
Eddie Jones having faced that in the World Cup final, and it's not a rash decision. Eddie Jones uses data analysts who say this is the most effective way of winning rugby, the way South Africa are playing, and he tried to do it and couldn't do it and didn't quite get it right in the Six Nations. They couldn't adapt to that style of game, but certainly. That is what the top coaches in the world think is the easiest way and the most successful way to play is the way South Africa are at the moment. And so it's really, if we don't like it, it's down to World Rugby to adapt the laws because every single coach, every single player just wants to win next week.
And Damien, I mean, from our point of view, from a Lions perspective, certain players just didn't perform, did they? Really? I mean, Gatland talks about a game plan. In the first test they were executed. I mean, we couldn't catch a cold at the weekend. I mean, literally could not catch anything. I mean, from a South African perspective, they clearly play better. I mean, who would you say were their key players last weekend?
You asking me? Sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's a cliche to say that a kick is only as good as its chase. But the way that they structured their chases, they didn't quite commit everyone to the chase. Right, there was always someone kind of hanging back to win that second collision. Clean out. I think that was quite a smart adjustment they made from the first game. I feel like they were a bit gung-ho in their chases, and they were kind of, once you got past that first wave, there was a bit of space for the Lions, so I thought that adjustment was good. It's hard to pinpoint. I think Damian Dialende doesn't get enough credit in South Africa, and maybe you guys can tell me about the UK. I've seen a lot.
He's off to Munster, isn't he?
He's at Munster now.
He's at Munster. He gets a lot of write-ups about being the best 12 in the world, and you know what? Maybe he is. I don't know. He's certainly. Can someone be underrated and overrated at the same time?
He's on fire, isn't he?
I think
He's literally.
but yeah. Oh, careful.
Start the car.
I think both the South African centres have won that battle, haven't they? And that was an area that a lot of people were concerned about going into the Lions series is the centre berth, particularly outside centre. I think Henshaw moving to 13 is his better position. So that's interesting and how he fares, but absolutely South African centres have bossed it. The Lions back three helped things enormously last week by dropping everything as you alluded to, but I think the line-out drive was another area that just...
Lut Diogo changed the game for me. I mean, Franco Mostert being, the line-out general, Lut Diogo came on, and then a substitution from Jacques, who changed the game, but yeah, immense in the line-out.
Well, listen, we are going to move on to the selection and what we can look forward to in the deciding test match. But first of all, what you've all been waiting for, the drop kick challenge. Ben has been outstanding in his knowledge of Lions rugby against myself. Daniel, I think you're in charge of a few questions now.
Have you been briefed on the score, Daniel?
Yes, Ben is currently leading with 24 points.
Yeah, that's because I was shit-faced
to Lawrence's 18.
24-18, yeah.
I arrived 10 pints in
24-18.
Probably didn't help my cause at all. 10 pints of London Pride, of course. Drink responsibly. Or, if you're out with me, drink irresponsibly.
So, since Warren Gatland has rung the changes, I think it's 6 in total, we thought we'd mix up a few players' names.
You brought props.
I brought props. I've been handed props.
Wow.
And the two of you, or three of you, you get involved.
I'll just watch.
You guys have to tell me which player this is. So, this is I Bake Nude.
Wow. Good to know. Good to know.
I'm going to get in there early because I'm going to have the first choice, and then Ben on the next one you can. That's Bundyaki, yeah?
Oh, well, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, could be right. There we go.
So,
You're welcome, Lol. You're welcome.
thank you.
Yeah, that was a bit of a through ball there,
Listen,
wasn't it?
I got a D in French and I cheated, so thank you, Damien.
He needs all the help he can get.
So, Benny, this one's yours.
Yeah.
Glad Frog Hunt.
I think that's Tig Furlong.
Correct.
I was at
Thank
school
you.
with him.
Were you?
Who? Glad Frog
Glad
Hunt.
frog hunt. Hell of a shot.
I learned that he played GAA. That was something I learned this
No.
week. Tig Furlong, no?
Did he?
That's what I learned.
Jesus.
Yeah. He was a
Wow.
hurling player. Can't imagine it.
Okay, and then he ate
that
3
correct?
children. Didn't work out for him so well in GAA.
All right, Lawrence, I think it's you. Even-handed rum war.
Is that the winger, Van der Merwe?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, these are too easy.
That was the highlight, actually, of the selection announcement was Jason Leonard pronouncing the Hawaii Van der Merwe.
Jace being the Barking Express. He did very well, to be fair. Have you seen the British Lions videos of or the clips that they're showing on social of Jason? I mean, is it me or is he just getting larger and larger? I don't know. He keeps blowing his head. Well, we're back in Cape Town.
As such.
As such. It's going well, though. It's going well.
The bars opened up last week as well, so double the size
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
Yeah, clearly.
All right, next one.
Benny, on you.
Enjoys none law.
Wow. I think that might be the skipper, Alan Wynne-Jones.
Yeah, bang on. Finally, this will be an easy one, I reckon. Country Weasel.
Oh, Country Weasel might be Laws and Courtney, no?
Full house.
Very good.
Happy days.
Right, we are.
Does that mean I've won?
No, I think it does mean you won.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if the Lions win if the Lions win, we might come back for a sort of podcast special.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there could be a bit of extra time, but to be continued.
Come on, South Africa.
So,
We'll win that.
Let's take a closer look at the news that's coming out of both camps, because whilst all the cameras are on the British and Irish Lions and their selections, actually, Daniel, the Springboks got a few little problems of their own, actually, because 2 of the best players in the world, the number 9, Faf de Klerk, the golden unicorn himself, and Stefan de Toit is also out, the world's best player, or the world's best voted player. So how do you think that impacts the Springboks? And clearly they've taken a bit of a gamble in selection by picking a second row in the back row, no?
If the same result had happened and the game had gone exactly the same way, but Peter Steff went off in the 78th minute, for example, I would have been very, very worried. But the fact that they got through that with him, he went off in the first half, I think.
Yeah.
So that gives me some confidence. I am a bit worried that it probably means that Franco mastered Eben Etzebeth and is Lurt starting? No, he's not starting, is he?
Lud. Yeah.
Is Lurt starting?
Yeah.
3 of those locks, one obviously in the loose forward, they probably all have to get through 80 minutes because you'd imagine Mustard will come on for Khaleesi. I'm not too worried about Kobus Reinach. In fact, I'm jumping ahead here. I think one of the questions is who's my key player. If he plays well.
When was the last time he started a game of rugby?
Canada in the World Cup, I think.
Okay, so
God, that's well done.
Yeah.
I'm here all week. Thank you very much.
Oh, very good.
You're not worried about that, no?
No, well, the Pollard Reinach combination is one that they're familiar with in club.
Well, yeah, they
Are
played
you still-
Montpellier, right?
Are you still glowing about
I'm
the
still
correct
gloating about
answer?
that.
Montpellier, they don't look like they were playing much rugby.
No, that's true. But he's quite a similar player to Faf. His box kicking is better than Herschel Janchi's. Look, I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. Obviously, Faf de Klerk is so in the groove of what the Springboks do. But if Kobus can have a good game, then I'm less worried. If he has a stinker, well then tickets, I think.
I don't think his box kicking's as good as Faf. And funnily enough,
Although other parts of his game clearly
absolutely. Funnily enough, when he first came to the UK, he was seen as the better kicker, and Faf playing for Sale suddenly developed this kicking game that is bang on the money, and that would be one glimmer of hope as a British and Irish Lions supporter, is that the bombardment's not quite as accurate. But like you said, Lawrence, we saw him for Northampton. His speed is higher. and his ability to read the opposition. So when you're playing a style of rugby,
maybe 9 intercept tries.
Yeah, when you're playing a style of rugby that is reliant on big moments in the game. So if you look at all South Africa's big wins, arm wrestle, keep it tight, and then suddenly 2 or 3 playmakers in the team, like Cheslin, Colby, Bapimpi, will just light the touch paper and go, and you're suddenly 14 points down, you don't know where it's come from. He is exactly the sort of player to deliver that with, like you said, a length of the field interception.
But when he was at Northampton, he just tore the Premiership apart. He was, he was in the shortlist for the Player of the Year. He's making, I think, compared to Faf, he's making maybe 4 or 5 times the yardage per game that Faf does. So he's got a very. Do you think though, clearly, when he plays for South Africa now as the number 1 choice, he's going to be asked to play in a very different way to what his natural game is? Yeah. I guess it comes down to, has he got the discipline to kind of stick to that, or I don't know. Because I think hopefully the game finally might open up a little bit. I mean, might become a slightly different game to the one we've seen. Because, as I said to you before, Ben and I watched the semi-final of the World Cup, and we decided to have half a glass of white wine for every box kick that went up, and we were both carried out at half time.
Wow, I limped out. Well,
we were both carried out, to be fair.
But I think there's
thank God we were, because they did us a favour getting rid of us at half time. I mean, what a game! 64 box kicks. I mean, that's not.
But for me, there's an onus, isn't there? Like take every hat off. But as a rugby fan, right? You want this game to be an absolute humdinger. You want it to go toe to toe. You want it to be fast and loose, and everything that perhaps the series hasn't been. I'm not sure it will be, but as an advert for the game, the entire rugby world, as Ben said, this is the biggest Test match outside of a World Cup final. You'd love it to be an absolute slugfest of running rugby. I'm not sure it will be.
The other thing about Faf, which Cobus isn't, Faf is the fulcrum of everything revolves around him. He's. Love him or hate him, and actually, I love the way he plays. And he's one of those people that you should hate, but you can't help but love.
It's showing glaringly that we don't have a number 9 of that class at the moment.
But
Conor Murray
not
was
just
a few years
not
ago.
just his style of play, just how he's a presence in everything.
Even on defence,
everything's around him. He's in every. He starts every fight and then runs away. I love that.
Like every good scrum half. I mean, to be fair, that doesn't make him world class. That just makes him a number 9.
I don't think Cobus is that personality. I think Cobus is a bit quieter. And his talent is there, and if everyone else is playing well, he'll be the person that wins you the game, or puts the cherry on the cake. But he's not the guy that if the back's against the wall and you're really struggling, that will get everyone else going.
One thing I do want to talk about is the Lions selection. Warren Gatland, someone I know very well, quite a bold selector. When he selected that team for the first test, there was a lot of question marks raised. It proved to be the right selection. Obviously, the way that the fault lines appeared in the second test, it was inevitable that there were going to be some changes. You start in the back 3. He's made 6 changes. Clearly 2 in the back 3, front row, all the obvious areas where the Lions lost the game. We've all played rugby. There was always casualties when you have a bad performance. And I don't think anyone can argue with some of those selections. I guess, Damien, just looking at it, and we'll move on to the bench shortly, no Owen Farrell, he's clearly had to gamble a little bit, because if he's chasing the game late on in the second half, he actually, I don't think last week when he was chasing the game, he went to his bench and there was nothing on there that was going to change the game. This week, he's actually put people on that can change the game. Sam Simmons, Finn Russell. But, I mean, do you think that the overall selection is a fair one?
Well, he's brought, and I remember going to that now the sort of orchestrated. We laughed about it earlier, but Jason calling out the team. The first name that was called was Bundyaki, and everyone went, "Oh my God, this isn't going to be the Lions squad that we thought was going to be." And you got Aki and Henshaw in the centre, and I guess I'm excited by that because they know each other. They played quite a bit together. Josh Adams had a good tour. And Liam Williams, for me, was one of the players of 2017 in New Zealand. They've got to spark something, and they haven't been able to do that. And I think it's a great shame the likes of Stuart Hogg and Anthony Watson missed out, because they are exceptional rugby players. But these, as Warren has said this week, this is a cup final, and these guys have got an opportunity now to step in and make a huge difference. And they absolutely need something just to fire this whole back line up.
And Ben, up front, I guess no surprises. Wyn Jones back at loose head. We have to change. The Lions have to change the picture to the referees, to the officials, don't they? I thought the scrum in the first test just about held on. got parity, and as the game wore on, actually we got stronger. I think South Africa reversed their selections and actually dominated, although there was one or two decisions that could have gone in their favour. But it's almost a selection that it is more about the officials just changing that picture early on in proceedings.
I think the first half they were all right. Second half it fell apart a bit. Sutherland obviously isn't on the bench this week. They've brought Wyn Jones back and put Mako on the bench. And I think, sometimes players just go through a run of lack of confidence, and I think it affected Sutherland. He gave away a stupid penalty, and he was getting done at the scrum a little bit, and dropped that ball at the front of the line out. And I just think it was a bit of a worry, and sometimes it can just become, here he comes, okay, we know how to scrummage against this guy. And I know I spoke to a couple of the South Africans straight after the World Cup final, and when Dan Cole went on, they knew exactly what they were going to do against Dan Cole because they'd found a weakness in his game. And you just can't have that coming off the bench because the game's lost. As soon as the scrum is still such an important factor of the game, because you might not be kicking the penalties, but if it's giving you the field position to play off. So I feel for Sutherland because I had him on my in my test squad going into this tour, but it just hasn't quite worked out for him. Don't say that on social media.
Do you think Jason Leonard has actually packed his boots and is going to make an extraordinary comeback in the final test, a la World Cup final?
The scrum wouldn't move, but neither would anything else on the pitch.
It ain't going up, it ain't going down. Do you think up front, in the final analysis, with all the kicking that is happening in this test match, my opinion is that we still lack one or two exceptional ball carriers to really trouble South Africa. The average carry last week, admittedly there wasn't that much ball given to the forwards, but the average carry was 1.5 metres, right? Which is like that's almost Steve Borthwick-esque, isn't it? Really, I mean,
if you don't have that,
it's not quite that good actually.
If you don't have that, the backs can't play, can they? They've got no momentum. They've got a line speed flying at them, so they can't get the ball as wide as they want to, and we've seen that with the Lions style.
But also it's ownership. If you're a forward and you're playing in the pack, early on in the game, give me the ball. Let's have a short, let's have a 5-man line out, and let's have a crack. And obviously, don't send me down the channel where Delande is. Let's run a nice decoy there, and let's run a line where we can actually get into some space. And I want to see our Lions forwards taking ownership.
It's still a worry for me. Yeah, I don't think because Maro Itoje, Alan Wyn Jones, great players, but neither of them are someone that will dent a hole. They're good second carriers, brilliant secondary carriers. I said if Wyn Jones isn't fit, I wondered whether Warren would have looked at someone like Ellis Genge, bringing him in at last minute. My worry is that the Mako and Ty Furlong are the two best carriers. No, they're not, and they're not doing it.
And one's on the bench, and one, in your back row, we've not got people carrying the ball, and it's a real concern.
It is a huge problem, and I totally with you. That is where at the moment South Africa are winning the game, because the Lions can't get any sort of foothold to allow the game they want to play, which is much wider than South Africa. But if you don't, I think you Wasp boys used to say, didn't you, earn the right to go wide. You have to do the hard stuff first before you start shoveling on the ball, or the likes of Elliot Daly or Harris get caught miles behind the gain line.
Are we? Let's talk about the selection on the bench. Surprised, Damian, about the selection on the bench. Finn Russell obviously is one of those players that came into this tour with a big rap, and because of his Achilles, I think he's not had that opportunity. Sam Simmonds, ironically, a bit of a game changer. Bit of a concern, there's only one sort of goal kicker in the Lions team, really. No Owen Farrell, raised a few eyebrows, but you can kind of see where Warren Gatland's going with the selection, because this is one game of rugby, and I guess if he hasn't got it right at half time, he needs some options off the bench that are actually going to change the course of the game.
I think Sam Simmonds for me is Players Player of the Year, has just lit up the Premiership for the last 3 or 4 years. I quite like the fact that Warren sort of stuck a couple of fingers up and said we're going to take this guy because we think he can change the game, and I think coming off the bench he can change the game. I really think he is that good. But for me, it's if the Lions are down and out at half time, you're putting a huge amount of pressure on that bench to come on and turn this game around. But I'm excited by the bench. Eddie calls them the finishers. I think it's a really good way of looking at it, and it's a squad effort. So I'd love to see Sam Simmonds get his Lions cap and come on and absolutely tear it up, because I think he belongs on that stage.
Damien, I'm going to stay with you. It's obviously been a very intense and very different Lions tour to any that we've ever seen. There is one more game to be played, but clearly all of these players, it's now the end of their season. As the CEO of the RPA, when these players come back, just give us a perspective on what you as the head of the Rugby Players Association would advise to those players. What's in place to make sure that these players, when they play for their clubs, whether it be Leicester or Wasps or whoever, and when they play for their countries, are actually going to be able to, look half decent again?
Well, you've just had the most extraordinary 18 months of rugby, and in terms of finishing, the previous season, I think we had the shortest pre-season in history going into the next season. And again, this is why for me the likes of Marcus Smith, Sam Simmons are even more extraordinary, because they fronted up and delivered. The Saracens guys obviously in the Championship, but those guys who fronted up, they now get a 10-week break going into the new season. We're now going into a World Cup cycle. The pressure on these players now is unbelievable. And Ben was a former trustee of our charity, Restart Rugby. Lawrence, you've helped us fantastically over the years, and the mental health demands now on our players, both men, women, 15-7s, has never been higher. So I think that the important thing now is there is guaranteed rest for our players. There's a clear pathway in terms of the next 12 months, the next 2 years going into the World Cup. These players can actually look forward and say, well, I'm going to have agreed guaranteed rest here, downtime here. We've got a very tight autumn series, Tonga.
So just on a serious point, we've seen Ben Stokes come out and say, look, enough is enough. Yeah. I mean, after this weekend, when are we likely to see these Lions players playing again? Well,
they won't be playing again until late October, and some won't play again until they go into the autumn series against Tonga. And then you're playing South Africa and Australia. So it's almost becoming this endless winter that is often talked about.
So they're not playing for their clubs, basically.
So they won't be playing for their clubs until probably the European Games in...
How much are Leicester Tigers paying those players?
Well, there's not that many there. It's fine.
They've all gone Safa now at Leicester Tigers, to be fair.
But, it is.
That explains the problem that English rugby or world rugby faces, really.
Totally. And the demands are huge, and it's not just physical; it is about mental, and it's trying to make sure that our players are as well rested going into and every Lions tour, and you've both been on them. Cyclically, the team or the country that contributes the most Lions will dip after that Lions tour. Has a terrible autumn.
You're right,
Six Nations.
and actually, I think it's more akin to a World Cup, and a long run in a World Cup, you always get a huge drop off. You get a hangover, and because they've been in this bubble, usually the external stuff with the Lions tour, and I'm not just talking about going out on the smash. I'm talking about all the other bits and pieces. It feels different, and it feels like a bit of a lift. They haven't had that. So it's like another World Cup.
Am I right in thinking that when they come back, they've got to quarantine when they get back? Or is that, as Boris's announcements today, just they'll all be in Beefer on a 2-week bender?
No, South Africa's still on the red list. Yeah, unless they're exempt for whatever reason, they would have to.
We're not worried about this.
But the other thing is, obviously,
half, call it that anymore.
Half the South African team play in England anyway.
Yeah.
So a number of players.
The same plane.
No, so they don't have to isolate when they get back.
No, they do have to isolate. They have to go through a quarantine process.
Keep an eye out on all those players if you spot them.
Exactly. Just turn your camera off. They have to quarantine when they come back. They have to isolate.
So Warren Gatland's talking about going.
Where are they going to put them?
Jersey, maybe
in the Cabbage Patch, right here.
Well, I mean, is that metaphorically speaking in the Cabbage Patch?
Padded cell, because without the threat of having to get up for training the next day, they're locked into a hotel together for 10 days. Oh, crikey.
Well, it's fair to say that there have been quite a few moving parts in this space, but I believe Jersey and Dublin are going to be the two hubs.
Have you not done some sort of loyalty card for the players in Ibiza or something, Ushuaia or all?
No, I've saved that for you, Lol.
Okay. Well, very sensible. Right, we're going to move on because I know we've got lots of questions from the floor, but before we do, we're going to move to our outstanding section. So, Daniel, if I could start with you, one player to watch either from the starting lineup or the bench. I guess I should ask you, a man in green and gold, really. Who should we be looking out for? Is it Cobus Reinach? Is it one of the forwards? Who is the player that you think is going to make the difference in this final deciding test?
Well, since I said Cobus Reinach already, I'll choose someone else. Franco Mustard in the loose forward.
He's from the Munsters, isn't he, that chap?
I'd never seen him I'd never quite considered him to be a loose forward, if I'm honest. I just always saw him as a as a rangy lock, line-out general. You know, he's a devout student of Victor Matfield. They've spent a lot of time together when Victor was coaching with the Box. Victor told me that he is the most naturally gifted line-out caller. Can you be a naturally gifted line-out caller? Anyway,
I think you can. I totally agree with
that. Should we ask one naturally gifted?
I totally agree. Having watched him play for Gloucester, I think he's a fantastic player.
Victor just said that he just read the line out so well, and
Ben was naturally gifted because he had Martin Johnson, he had himself, and he said, we can't call to Lawrence because he's definitely not going to catch the ball. So, I mean, I've got to be a magician here, really, haven't I?
And they were just outgunned when Peter Steff went off and they only had 2 jumpers. They were just outgunned. And as soon as they had Lurd come on, it just kind of worked better. So if Franco can stay on the field for 80 minutes, have a good game, I think he made the most tackles out of any Springbok. If he's big, that whole pack will be moving forward.
And Damian, who's the line that catches your eye either in that starting 15? Well, go with the starting 15. Who's the guy that catches your eye? Is it someone that's come in, or is it someone that you just think has got a big game in them?
Well, I just think those players who've come in have got so much to prove, not least to their teammates and coach, that they should have started from the beginning. And again, I go with someone like Liam Williams because I just think he was the craft engineer of one of the Lions tries of all time in New Zealand. I think if he gets a bit of free space with that,
he's like Woody from Toy Story. Have you seen him walk? I mean, he's just literally.
He is just. I just think he's a magician. So I really hope that he gets a little bit of space early on, and that can really set the tone for what I hope will be an extraordinary Test match.
And Benny, for you, Lions or Springboks or?
I'm going to go for someone who has been, a lot of players and ex-players' first name on the team sheet, but hasn't quite delivered yet. And his work rate is what you'd expect. But Tom Curry is an unbelievable rugby player. He has had a brilliant battle with Hamish Watson, who's in superb form. But the game hasn't quite gone his way for that man of the match performance. And we know he's got it in him. And I think that'll be eating away at him. And he's still, you watch him play, if you sort of just track him for a bit, you won't believe his work rate. But sometimes the game's got to come to you a little bit, and if it does, I think he's got a lot of pent up frustration.
I'm going to go with a player who I promise you I did not even think was going to be on the aeroplane, and that's Ali Price. Okay, so he got picked in the first test, he got left out, and clearly there's no tempo in the game. Now Warren Gatland talks about trying to move the South African forwards around, trying to play with tempo. He's been out in the press conference this week, Gatland, saying we need to play with tempo. Please don't analyse every decision. Please don't make sure every decision goes to the TMO. You can bet your bottom dollar Alan Wynne-Jones will be talking to the French referee. I think the game will flow a bit more anyway because...
How is Alan Wynne-Jones' French?
Well, I mean,
bonjour.
Not that good. But I just think Ali Price, for me, is a guy that if the Lions are to be successful, I think we need tempo in our game. And as I said, I didn't think he'd be on the plane. I thought there were other scrum halves that were in contention, but fair play to him. He's got that opportunity, and I think he could be the difference in the two. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. Big round of applause to the Cabbage Patch and all the staff here. Thank you. And a big round of applause to my panel, to Ben Kay, to Daniel Gallen, and to Damian Hopley. Thank you very much indeed. And thanks for listening and listening. Enjoy Saturday's game, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you.